Sometimes when we stand for the truth, we have the distasteful duty of saying things that affect our friends and our allies. It's my duty today.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
Welcome, friend, to the program. I have been a pro-life leader in this country for the better part of 3 decades. And I know the movers and shakers, been an insider at different points. And so I think that it's a duty of mine to discuss how and why the pro-life movement, in spite of hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars of funding, why we have failed to restore the protection of law to unborn babies. I ask you to watch this show with an open mind and see what you think of my conclusions. And guess where the idols were? Who can remember? They were in his dad's front yard. It was a thing of honor. You know, they would probably rotate the idol around. Whose turn is it this month to have the idol? Oh, it's yours, Gideon's dad. So they put the idol up. There was a pagan, demonic idol in his dad's yard. And God said, I'm not letting you go to fight the Midianites until you fight and get rid of that idol. So he was so afraid, he got 10 servants and went at night and broke them both down, chopped them up, and then made an altar to worship to God. What do you think of our opponents? I want to make their idols into firewood. So he accomplished it. The men of the city woke up in the morning. They began to interrogate who did this, and they said, it's Gideon. And they said, bring him out. He must die. If you're doing the right thing, there are times that people are going to want to kill you. Remember that. Jesus said, if the world hates me, remember, if the world hates you, remember, it hated me first.
Or put you in jail.
Or puts me in jail. Yes, thank you. I can tell you where some of the best jail food in the country is and some of the worst food, all right? So if food matters to you during your incarceration, see me after this speech. John, you distracted me, and I don't remember where I was going. Gideon, yes, of course, Gideon. He was required by God to tear down the idol, and people were angry, and they said, let's kill him. And his dad said, if Baal is a god, then let him defend himself. The man who tries to kill my son should be put to death today because Baal can take care of himself. And the people said, well, it's a good point. If Baal's God, then Baal's going to get him. And so they nicknamed Gideon Jerubbaal, he who contends with Baal. Now, why did you say that, Randall? For 2 reasons, the bad news and the good news. The bad news is we're overrun. In other words, Gideon's in the wine press. They've been under siege for 7 years. People are starving. It's bad, all right? And it was critical for him, as it's critical for us, to have an honest assessment of what's going on. Just like Patrick Henry did at the beginning, right? It was an honest assessment of what was happening. And our duty is to have an honest assessment before God as to what's happening. And in America today, the pro-life movement is overrun, okay? We are losing. If anyone tells you that we're winning, they are lying. Now, they may not be deliberately lying. They might be deceived themselves, right? And then trying to lead others into deception. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that they're telling you the truth about God, right? Yeah. They go through a lot of hoops. They knock on a lot of doors. They are deceived. They're good people. You know what I mean? They're walking with the light that they have, but the light that is there concerning Christ is darkness. But they believe they're doing the right thing. So they are deceived, and they are deceiving others. And so when someone tells you that we're winning, yeah, how many dead babies do you have to see in a pile to recognize that that's a false statement? One. Now, thank God for Amendment 1. Thank God for movement, all right? But overall, the trajectory of the pro-life movement in this country is on par with the pro-life movement in Europe, in France, in England, which is virtually politically irrelevant. When John Boehner can betray us without fear, I'll get to that in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll save some of my best shots for Mr. Boehner. Can I get a witness? Yes. Thank you. Don't front load it, Randall. I know it's tempting. Please help me. My little Ally McBeal bubble's about to pop. I'm dating myself, right? Thank you, Jan, for laughing. Who's the Ally McBeal, Dad? Never mind. Ally McBeal. So we have the bad news that we're losing, but we have the good news that we can win. See, ultimately, Gideon prevailed, right? So I have to give you an assessment of where we are and how we got there, and then quickly give you an assessment of what we need to do to get out, and then I'll open it up for questions. I'll leave a lot of stuff unsaid and open it up for questions. There's a good book out, by the way, you should read, called We Won't Get Fooled Again. I do not sell this book. I used to sell it. We Won't Get Fooled Again. If you're watching by TV, go to our website. We'll get you a copy. And it's a look at the religious right. The religious right made up of evangelicals and Catholics, okay? People who are followers of God, the Blessed Trinity, our Lord Jesus Christ. The religious right is probably the most funded political movement in American history. Billions and billions of dollars have been raised.
You have two choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah?
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
The religious right is probably the most funded political movement in American history. Billions and billions of dollars have been raised by pro-life, pro-family groups. You could tick off 15 or 20 just from memory. And we have virtually no true political victories to show for it. We're overrun by the same-gender matrimony people. Overrun. Okay? We have been overrun with the blood of the innocent. Over 55 million babies crying out to God for judgment. Their blood staining our landfills, running in our sewers. The blood of these babies crying out. We have been overrun. And yet the fundraising letters keep going out. The false, we're on the edge of victory statements still being made. The same failed patterns still being used. I have a little saying, I'll give it to you now. The pro-life movement became the pro-life establishment. The pro-life establishment became the pro-life industry. And the pro-life industry became collaborators.
Amen.
A movement is full of fire, pathos. It's moving. Action in the streets. How many of you were arrested with Operation Rescue in the late 80s, early 90s? Anybody here? Okay. A couple people. Nice. Good to see you. Were we in jail together?
Dallas.
Dallas, we were? All right, nice. It's good to see you again. Oh, I remember you. You're number 72, right. You looked good in stripes, by the way. In the late 80s, early 90s, do you realize that Operation Rescue is the largest civil disobedience movement in American history? There were 7,000 arrests in the civil rights movement from 1958 to 1968. 7,000 arrests. They changed the tide of America. The rescue movement between 1987, late 87, and 94, 6.5, 7-year window, we had over 75,000 arrests. 10 times the number. But we didn't win. We didn't win. We failed in our objective. Because our objective is to make it a criminal act to kill babies from conception till death. And I have to own that. We all have to own that we have not prevailed yet. And it grieves me, it vexes me. But I owe it to God and to the babies and to God's people to have an honest assessment. And we were this close to winning. And someday I'll tell you some of the places where we made mistakes, where we blinked, and where the clergy blinked, where bishops and priests and the evangelical superstars blinked, and where we could have won. But we went from being the pro-life movement to the pro-life establishment and wanting pictures with George Bush and wanting access to Newt Gingrich. Are you following me? It's what happens when you become a part of the establishment is that you don't speak against the establishment because you're part of it. That's what separated Winston Churchill from the other leaders in England in the 1930s. He was a member of the Conservative Party, and the 3 prime ministers prior to him, MacDonald, Baldwin, and then Chamberlain, the most infamous of them all, they were all members of his party. But what he said was, I value truth and justice and the liberty of England more than I value loyalty to the party. And so he spoke the truth and was ostracized, vilified. Any Churchill fans here? The most important book I tell people that they can read, leaders especially, outside of the Bible, the most important single volume that somebody could read, in my opinion, for a leader, is The Last Lion Alone, written by William Manchester. The Last Lion Alone. It's a look at Churchill's life from 32 to 39 or 40. And oh my goodness, what a phenomenal prophetic work. Anyway, you look at Churchill, and he's a paradigm. He's a testimony of how we should act when we have been overrun and how we should proclaim the truth. So the pro-life movement became the pro-life establishment. I won't belabor that point. And then it became the pro-life industry. There's money in them there hills. There are fundraising machines that would blow the human mind in Washington, D.C. and around the country. Fundraising machines that would blow your mind how much money they raise. And what do they have to show for it? And then finally, you have pro-life collaborators. I'll make one illustration, then I'll go on. The greatest proof of pro-life collaboration, and then, of course, they're not even pro-life anymore, collaborating is...
Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today.
And then finally, you have pro-life collaborators. I'll make one illustration, then I'll go on. The greatest proof of pro-life collaboration, and then, of course, they're not even pro-life anymore, collaborating is this. They agree with the enemy. They're collaborating. So John Boehner betrays us, refunds Planned Parenthood after he told us that he wouldn't. And what do pro-life groups do? Nothing. Think back to when Boehner refunded Planned Parenthood over and over. How many pro-life groups do you remember getting on TV, sending out press releases, condemning Boehner's treachery? But I see heads shaking. You don't remember anyone doing it, do you? There was one. We were in Washington, D.C. at the time. Our ministry was based in D.C. So I gathered together a group of people, and we held a sit-in at John Boehner's office. After he became speaker, we went and took a delegation of people to him and said, we're happy he won. If he betrays us, we will count him our adversary, and we will run a primary against him, and we will denounce him. I mean, I told his chief of staff this. It was like, so then Boehner betrayed us, and we did a sit-in at his office and said he's a collaborator. See, Pilate is one thing. Judas is another. Pilate you expect to do bad things. Judas is part of the tribe. So John Boehner says, I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, I'm pro-life, and then betrays us. That's a Judas spirit. Obama is a Pilate spirit. I have more contempt for Judas. And then the people that kissed up to him after his treachery. So, if you look at the victories, and I'll show you how I'm going to do this as a transition point. If you look at the victories that various movements had that I mentioned to you, they involved 5 things, all right? I'll quickly focus on them, then we'll take the questions. Number 1 is their rhetoric. Number 2, the images that they showed. Number 3, the actions that they took. Number 4, the sacrifices that they made. And number 5, their final fruit. Now, we've already discussed the final fruit of these movements, total victory, right? But study their rhetoric. It was incendiary. The rhetoric of William Lloyd Garrison, the rhetoric of the suffragettes. They took the Declaration of Independence and just changed it around a little bit and basically said that men were tyrants for not letting them vote. That men were just as bad in America as King George III ever thought of being, because King George wouldn't let us vote and you men won't let us vote. So their rhetoric was incendiary. And then their images. Remember the pictures of black slaves with their backs all torn up with scars? Before the use of the camera, they had political cartoons. Think of the Boston Tea Party. Think of Liberty, where they got, the Tree of Liberty, where people were hung in effigy. Okay? That's what they did. And that's exactly what we are not doing today. What we are not doing today is having the rhetoric, having the images, having the sacrifice that helped prevail in times past. When a pro-life group says, or a pro-life leader says, we will not show images of aborted babies, they are collaborating with the killers. I know that's painful for some of you to hear. I'm a Jew. I'm in a concentration camp. I'm one of the staff for the Nazis. I've got a camera. I take pictures of the Jews, piles of bodies. Okay? I take pictures of the ovens. And the Nazis say to me, please don't show them. If I agree to not show the pictures of my brothers and sisters being butchered, what have I become at that moment? I'm a collaborator because I'm hiding the truth. Well, we're afraid of offending women who've had their baby killed. Well, I'm afraid of offending the Nazi guards who killed Jews. All right, questions. Where'd that microphone go? Justin, you've got it. All right, if you've got a question, Justin, you stand up and you hand it to the people and you get to ask the question. So raise your hand. My son, stand up. My son will hand you this for any questions you have. Go ahead, give him the mic, please. I need you to have the mic, and I'll repeat the question. Should I just repeat the question for time's sake? All right, go ahead.
I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years. And sadly, we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy.
The last thing that you mentioned about the images and whatnot,
yes,
it makes me wonder why we don't see a lot more on media, daytime TV, about these you know,
right,
rallying
yes.
people to stop abortion. Why aren't we bombarded like a Democratic or Republican campaign during voting season?
The question is, why don't we see more images of aborted babies?
Or just, you know, stop abortion. Doesn't it have to be images?
Well, it needs stopping abortion does need to be said, and child killing, but you need to show the victims, period. Showing the victims is central to victory. It's not an also-ran. When you see the images of the piles of Jewish bodies, you say, no more anti-Semitism. Never again. When you see the skulls from Rwanda, then you say, we're not going to stand by while a slaughter like this happens again. We're going to intervene, right? You understand? The images are central. And the reason that you don't see the images more often is because most pro-life groups have agreed to not show them. If you go to the March for Life, look, when I was in the 1980s, 1990s, when I was there year after year after year speaking at the platform with Nellie Gray, there were signs of dead babies everywhere. Now, almost none. But worse is that we have the mechanism before us to get the images on TV. And it's by running for federal office. If you want to show pictures of dead babies, you talk to me. I will show you how to run for federal office, because federal law requires that TV stations who have a federal license must run the ads of federal candidates. Not state candidates, not local candidates, federal candidates. So when I ran against Obama in 2012 in the Democratic primary in Oklahoma, say, which I did, I beat him in 14 counties. Wow. I beat a sitting president in 14 counties in a primary. I won 6 or 7 delegates. They changed the rules and stole them from me, which we knew they would. They're honest thieves. So that was right. Thank you, Michael, for that obligatory laughter. And I think I got that. So they changed the rules. But how did I do it? I showed ads. I raised money and showed television ads all over the state of Oklahoma showing dead babies, saying, if you vote for this man, you are a part of these dead children. Another question.
Randall, I agree that we should criminalize abortion, but how do we do that? How do we criminalize abortion?
You use legislatures like North or South Dakota or Arizona. You go to states where you could pass a law that truly outlaws child killing. And then you tell National Right to Life to go to the hot place when they try and undermine what you're doing. And you just, because National Right to Life, by the way, is the biggest collaborator in the country. I don't have time to go over the history with you, but they are collaborators with the child killing. They have undermined every effort to criminalize child killing. It's not time, it'll just get overturned, blah, blah, blah. So go to a state and take all you can get. If you've got a plane full of hostages, what's your goal? Get every single one of them free, right? And if you can't get them all free on the first visit, what do? You keep going back and you say, would you give us the infirmed, please, and the elderly? Let's just start with that. And you get what you can get. But you always say publicly, our goal is to get every hostage. That's where you can have the dialogue, at least with incrementalism, is to say our goal is to criminalize child killing. These people go, well, we want to regulate the abortion clinics for safety for women's health. What bull crap. Just be honest. I don't want a well-regulated concentration camp or a well-regulated slave auction, right? Say, we want these places regulated because we want to put them out of business because they're murdering babies. And we intend to criminalize everything that they're doing. But in the meantime, the best we can do is get them regulated and get them out of business. Stop the shenanigans. Someone almost clapped. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next question. You can't ask. You're too young. Plus, you're my son. I'll let you in a minute. Go ahead.
Of all the counties in the state of Tennessee, Shelby County, where Memphis is located, has the largest amount of abortions. What is so frustrating is that there, as far as I know, nothing said from the pulpit about abortions in the black churches. How do we solve that problem?
The question is, we have more dead babies here in this county than any place in the state, and virtually all of the African American pulpits are silent regarding the murder of children in their own community. Well, and how do we deal with it? You say the truth. Well, I hope that as much as possible you weren't disturbed. Think about what I'm saying. Go to our website and learn more how you can be an effective tool to end this Holocaust.